Six Sages Gaming is brought to you by GamersGauntlet.net. Check them out for all your single, sealed product, and playmats.
Hey guys, welcome to another Six Sages Gaming deck spotlight. Today I have for you the green fairy list that a lot of people are asking for. I really wanted to cover the light version because I like the more aggressive plays, but as I found out in testing, and you'll see in our dual series videos, this list is probably a little bit better than I was giving credit. Now you'll notice that there are a lot of proxies in this, so I do apologize, but this is for our A4 pre-Vingolf Dual Stone series that we're going to be doing through the rest of the month. The thing I like about this version, it's definitely a more controlling version, and I don't want to call it tempo because it's not tempo, it's not really a control deck because you're only playing Wall of Wind. So it's certainly more of a mid-rangey kind of fairy deck where you want to spend your first couple turns getting in the early damage where you can, but it's very, very hard to win with this deck unless you have a sprint that's going to win you the game, or if you resolve a queen that just somehow goes untested, which thankfully Escort the Fairy King does help out a lot. So, first we'll talk about the ruler that everyone knows and loves, then we'll talk about these stones, and then finally go into the main deck. Up first we have Reflect, Child of Potential. I know a lot of people are familiar with this ruler already, and I realize that everyone is probably thinking, why is it another Reflect deck? I know, but if I build a deck for you guys, I want to make sure it has the best ruler possible for it. I'm not going to build a deck and then say, use Alice Fairy Queen just because it's trying to be different. I want to give this deck the best chance it has at surviving at your local metas or wherever. So, not much needs to be said about this guy. The pump is super relevant for surviving combat or getting extra damage. The untap is great to make your stuff survive so it doesn't die in the crackback. And then, of course, being able to filter a card is also super relevant, which allows us to play these one or two ofs that we're more likely to see in our deck. On the other side, the one thing that really needs to be commented on for this is, yes, that sometimes the other parts are relevant, but more often than not, you're going to just root for counters, tutor for either Song of the Fairy King, I believe it's called, or Sprint, and just win through either one of those cards, either through getting all that card advantage back or just by swinging through damage. So Reflect just does way too much for this deck for it to not be the ruler of choice. Going into our stone deck, we are playing a very green heavy deck as you saw, so we have 2 Wind Magic Stones, and then the other one that's another A4 proxy. We have First Flight Memoria. So this is a great card for color filtering. Obviously it's not the best, but it still allows us to play our spells, so that's extremely relevant. It taps for wind or green on its own, and then if you tap green and that stone, you can filter it into one of the other attributes. It's super relevant. You know, it's not the greatest for having to pay, let's say, 2 to get a Black Moon Fairy on the board, but as long as we can get that on the board and we get the value out of it by getting something else back that's more important, like another Oberon or a Queen, then it works out. So it's one of those necessary evils in the deck, if you will. And then lastly, we have 4 Fairies Memoria. Obviously, this is more or less just a staple in the deck. Allows us to cast all our spells. In the light version, it's a lot more common that you get to use the plus 200 buff that pretty much everyone I've ever played against forgets about. And yes, that's the last box of text on there. So it does help for that, but it does make our, casting our cards a lot smoother as long as they're fairies. So let's go into the 1-drops that we have, which is, obviously a lot of them. And obviously all these are fairies unless said otherwise. So Escort of the Fairy King. This card has been absolutely great. It was actually even better than I thought. Basically, it's a 0/600, so it's not impressive. It's not attacking anytime soon. It's actually very, very hard to get this card to do damage in this style of deck. I think it'd be a lot better in the light aggressive version. But it obviously still has a place in this since all our stuff taps for green. We can easily cast it. So when it enters the battlefield, it prevents or makes your target not able to be removed by spells or abilities. Not targeted by spells or abilities, what I mean. So if they go to, say, Valentina Goddard, you flash this in, prevent it. If they go to throw a matchstick at it, flash it in, prevent it. They use Space-Time Anomaly, flash this in, prevent it. All that stuff. This is I'm going to try to out-tempo my opponent by playing a 1-drop spell, which is always great. It gives us a body, and it's a fairy, which is super relevant then on later for Oberon. I give a double quick cast, but or more importantly for Queen, Titania, who lets us get it plus 200, so then it can finally do some damage. So the one drawback I found for this card is that it's kind of hard to attack with it, but it is an absolute lifesaver. For Flame Sprite, this should be absolutely no surprise. It's one of the best fairies, and it's one of the core fairies, so you're going to see 4 of these in both decks 100% of the time. Swiftness is great, especially when we play things like Sprint, and then we can attack for that last 800 damage out of nowhere. We can tap it to kill stuff, and more often than not, you're going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 fairies on the field, so you're able to remove their stuff. Now, I will add that as a note, again, because this is a more mid-rangey version, we want to play stuff like Oberon with Flash, we want to play a lot of our Fairy Resonators at Flash or instant speed, so it is kind of hard to build up a board where you're just letting them all be out there and Flame Sprite to do damage. However, this is the part where I say Reflect is so important. You can always tap Flame Sprite, do the damage, use Reflect's untap ability, still end a turn, ping something and kill it. So you can do double damage, with one Flame Sprite, which is, again, extremely, extremely relevant. Another new card from the set, and I don't remember the full name, but I just remember the last 2 parts were Sacred Vision. It's a light fairy, it's a 100/600, and you can banish it to destroy target addition or card in chance standby area. Yeah, the chance standby is probably completely irrelevant. However, there's quite a few additions that might see play. If you want to play some kind of Regalia, obviously you want to be able to hate out, excuse me, Barriers of Shadow, things of that nature. In the Valentina deck, it was able to kill Shangri-La's. This is just a card that I think is great. It's a 100/600. You, again, can flash it in to destroy something. But just having the toolbox effect in your deck, or the utility, really, that you can banish an addition that's giving you problems, is super relevant, and to me was a snap 4 play of. Now, if we were playing the light version, I'd rather play Moonbreeze Fairy or even Light Fairy in some matchups over that. But I would still play out of the sideboard, and perhaps. Another absolute staple that we have is Protection of the Fairies. So you get to cast this for free. It gives them +200/+200. And the important part here is that you can banish it to prevent the next damage. So there's going to be a lot of times where you just get to swing with the Water Sprite, have this on it. They try to revenge swing it. You just pop off the protection and it gets to live. So it creates a situation where this deck is all about those little incremental advantages that you gain by playing things like Protection, by playing things like Escort, things like Wall of Wind, that you just want to win all these small victories over the course of the game, so you're going to eventually build up enough either board state, tempo, however you want to phrase it, where you're either just going to win with either a sprint or your little attacks were getting in. So this card is also absolutely great, and I see it as an automatic 4 of every fairy deck ever. The true MVP, and probably my favorite fairy next to Flame Sprite. Like, Flame Sprite and Water Sprite are just the absolute core of every fairy deck that you could ever possibly want to build. Now, you'll see in our Duel Series video that I whiffed pretty hard multiple times, but when I only have, I think it's like 8 non-fairy things, 4, 8, or 10, I played 10, I'd forgotten this version plays a little bit more. It really, really bums me out when you hit a non-fairy off the top, but it is what it is. This card, no matter what, if you're playing a fairy deck, you're obviously gearing it towards to be like the vast majority of its fairies, so this card is playable, and you want to snap jam 4 of them because refilling your hand in a swarm type deck is absolutely important. The other reason why we're playing Wind, we have 4 Wall of Winds. Again, when all your drops cost 1, or all your spells more or less cost 1, the important ones, you can do something like play a Flame Sprite and still leave Wall of Wind up for their turn, or you can flash in Escort of the Fairy King to prevent another spell or ability from doing what they wanted to do. That is my biggest draw to this deck, is that you can, between Escort and between this card, depending on what phase of the game that you're in, you can just leave up a very low cost of 1 will and just out-tempo your opponent, or it's not true tempo, I should stop using that wording correctly, but it's a way to get the advantage, card advantage from your opponent for a very low cost. So it's a great way to punish your opponent. Then we have 3 Black Moon Fairies. This card is absolutely great. Again, it's kind of awkward when we don't have the stone to play it and we have to tap 2 First Flight's Memoria. Sure, it happens. But what this allows us to do is get something back out of the graveyard, which is going to be like our Oberon or Vivian's or our Queen, and it just creates more damage for you. It's basically a free block plus getting something back. So I never really liked 4. I think 3 is the perfect number for that. Then, speaking of Vivian, we have 3 of her. These are going to be the last bigger creatures of the deck and what makes the fairy decks actually work. So this is a card I was actually super disappointed with in this version of the deck, only because it's very hard to cast her, or you have so many other things that you probably want to be doing. like if you have an Oberon out already, you want to, one, try to play it at instant speed, and two, you have to have double light, which, as you saw in our stone base, is kind of hard. So with this, I think I'm going to cut it down to 2. I don't know what I'm going to add yet, but there needs to be more power in this deck, and maybe I have to add a sprint at the cost of Water Sprite being a little worse, but or I might just go up to 4 queens, because on the other hand, that card was absolutely great. So we'll see what direction that goes in. But I think that this card, I want it to be, it's so good in the light version that I was compelled to put it in this version to test it out. And I think it's fine as like a 1 or a 2 of, because it's still a very, very strong card, but it's definitely not the auto 4 of that it is in the other version. So I would definitely cut this down to 2, maybe add another queen or something. A guy that I will 100% give credit that he was a lot better than I thought, because I thought he was a 4 or 500, which is actually relevant. Oberon the Fairy King, or I forget his full name, but it's Oberon. He has Flying and Quick Cast, and he gives the rest of the fairies in your hand Quick Cast. I mean, that alone is a reason to take the green version seriously, and he's going to make a sweet full art, so there's that too. But, again, this is the part where I'm torn is, yes, it's a great card. It's a very, very, very strong card. Do not mistake me in any sense of the word. Like, getting to play all your cards at Quick Cast is great, but he doesn't do a lot of damage. Like, you're either playing Oberon or Vivian, at least as a 4-of in the deck, and Oberon says, hey, this game's going to go long. I hope you don't play, like, an actual... I forget what the Tragic Arrogance card is. One that's up, you sacrifice everything except 1. It bothers me a little bit, because this is going to be like your main source of damage for the game, and when you're only doing like 400 to 600 points at a time, you know, you're really forced to really try to find that sprint or really get a queen to resolve quickly, and then you have to play Protect the Queen, because those are like the real winners in your deck. So without any further ado, and the card that was as good as I thought it was going to be in this list, and obviously should now be a 4 of, Titania, however you want to say it, the queen, I forget what her full name is, but, so she has flying, which is great. She's a 1200 body, which is insane, and yes, she costs a lot, but I wrote Convoke, and basically what it says is, the text under says that as you go to play this card, you may tap a Resonator you control to cost 2 colorless less. Now, what I really like about this is that you can live the dream, and if for some reason it's late game and you don't have your Fairies Memoria, and you're able to play out all these other ones through First Flights, what have you, you can effectively just tap down 3 Fairy Resonators and tap a First Flight's Memoria and another green source, and you can play this card. Now, keep in mind what we said earlier, when you're playing things like this early and then you have either Wall of Wind or Escort the King on backup, it becomes very, very hard for your opponent to remove this card. This card was absolutely everything I wanted it to be and more. I'll probably cut the Vivian to make this a 4th. And I'll probably call this the King and Queen of Fairies, just because those 2 cards playing together are absolutely great. Now, the one awkward thing I will say is that, yes, Oberon gives it Quick Cast, which is great. However, we more often than not want to be playing Queen on our turn, so we can then attack with some Fairies to get more damage in. So it's a little awkward in that sense, but if you know that they're going to be playing into a removal spell, or if they're going to have something that might, might kill the queen or what have you, you want to leave Escort up, and you do want to play at that instant speed or flash speed or quick cast, just so you can get around the removal, and so it has a better chance of surviving. So it's one of those things like, do I want to go for the extra damage and try to win on my next turn, or do I want to just flash to the sin? The game's not going to end in like two or more turns, or 2 or less turns, and we really just need this to resolve, stay in field, and give them a very, very hard target to deal with. So again, if you play this down and you have a couple Escorts or Wall of Winds in hand, you're going to be feeling very, very good about winning that game. This card is very, very strong. As we saw, Gwyber with Flying is very, very strong. And it's definitely not obviously as good as Gwyber in terms of the cost reduction, because you still have to keep things on field and yada, 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 and it costs more, but it has an Anthem attached to it, which can be super relevant for all your Fairies. Now you'll see on here I only put Fairies game plus 200, and I left off the Water Resonators. The Water Resonators part is irrelevant to my deck unless you have... no, it is actually relevant because she's also a Fairy. But Water Sprite doesn't gain 400, for example. It's just 200. So the only thing that this is doing in this deck is gaining plus 200. Alright, then we have the 1-of Sprint to the Beast Blade. Nothing really needs to be said about this. Gives plus 600. We're playing this over the other couple of spells you could, strictly because it costs wind, and that's what all of our stones are going to tap for at the end of the day, except for Fairies Memoria. And then we play a one-of Song of the Fairy King. I didn't actually get to resolve this, but what it allows you to do is bring back 5 fairies, one-drop fairies from your graveyard back into play. And again, that can just be, it's a one-of since we're playing Reflect, so we can just tutor it up if we need to. And if they had some, like they flipped Dark Alice named 1, and you untap, okay, here we go, Song to get them all back, and hopefully you're going to be back in the game at that point. So it just felt like a really, really strong card to play, and I think it's something that if you get to resolve it, it's going to be great. Otherwise, it's just a one-of to have in the deck, as mostly as an insurance policy, and take it from there. So this was the Wind Fairy version of the deck. Again, I know not a lot of people are excited to see Reflect at the helm of it, but it's just that great. I like the deck. Again, I still am compelled to think that the light version is better just because it's more aggressive and it doesn't waste time dirtling around. However, Escort of the Fairy King is a very strong card. Cannot stress that enough. And obviously having the plays where you can do Wall of Wind or play a couple fairies out, play Wall of Wind to stop their 3-drop or something is great as well. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you liked this video. Like I said, make sure to check out our Duel Series video, which is also going to have this versus Valentino 1.0. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't already, our 5,000 subscriber video should be up very, very soon. So we're very excited to get out some Ultimate Guard products and some stuff for Gamers Gauntlet. So thank you very much to those two. And like I said, let us know what you guys think about the deck. Let us know what you would change or how your lists are coming around. And we'd be more than happy to start a discussion on that. So until next time, hope you guys like this. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next 6 Sages Gaming Deck Spotlight. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and leave us a comment with what you thought of the video. Don't forget to subscribe to 6 Sage Gaming and check out some of the deck spotlights, Duel Series, and Force of Community videos that are already on the channel. We also have a Facebook and a Twitter, so feel free to find us there. Lastly, if you have a deck that you would like featured in a video, be sure to drop us a comment below. Until next time, take it easy.